You said that you were more stressed in that relationship than now. Tell me what the difference is.
I'm not living in fear anymore. All the time anyway. It comes back. There's times when those feelings are there, it's exactly the same again.
So what sort of things would trigger off that kind of fear?
Confrontation, anger, me being angry with the kids, somebody being angry with me.
The stress response is mainly physical and psychological. Changes in your body and changes in your head, basically, and it's often felt as a sense of pressure or threat or losing control.
Stop off!
If I'm under lots of pressure, a glass of milk knocked over on the breakfast table can trigger huge stuff. If I'm feeling good, then, you know, that's not going to bother me.
It's bodily symptoms that probably most people notice first, although there are a number of emotional aspects as well, like anxiety and, in the longer term, feeling depressed. But what people are feeling is what's called the autonomic nervous system, which consists of the heart and the sweat glands and various other parts of the body of that nature. And it's the body preparing itself for emergency.
Before you go on, it's like I'm really kind of nervous, like I'm really nervous now. And then once I get off, I'll be so high, it's better than any drug. My heart's beating, yeah, so quite, well, that's candy. I'm alive. But no, it's beating quite quickly, and I've got butterflies and all that sort of stuff.
It's as though a certain danger has been sensed, and one readies oneself to do something about that. And the biologists are fond of telling us that that can be construed as fight or flight. But basically the two emergency responses that people would engage in if they're threatened would be running away or standing and fighting.
It's very painful. 15 seconds of non-laughter feels like 25 minutes. You start to notice that you're losing your grip on the microphone because the sweat beating off your hands is drenching it.
He feels scared, he feels frightened, his pupils dilate, his heart rate begins to increase, more blood goes to his muscles which prepare them for either fighting or running away. The smooth muscles inside his bowel contract, the hairs on the back of his hands and on the rest of his body tend to go erect.
So basically you're in a highly charged state, ready for action. There's biochemical things that happen in the blood where the anticoagulant levels increase just in case you're wounded.
A lot of people actually purposely go out after being stressed, like bungee jumpers or parachutists. And there's something about being really challenged, going to the absolute edge of one's comfort zone and maybe stepping over that and mastering it. And that brings us to a very important concept within health psychology about stress, and that's the concept of control. If you're feeling out of control, it doesn't matter what the situation is, one's under stress.
Sensational.
If there are predators on our tail, if we're surviving in the jungle, it's very good to have those kind of mobilization responses. But they tend to get mobilized these days in modern people by psychological dangers or psychological pressures. And so a lot of us are in that kind of tensed up state a lot of the time, often not quite sure why, because the dangers or the threats aren't all that obvious very often.
I'd been investigating child abuse cases for 8 years, and I was still okay, I was still just hanging in there, but if I carried on for another 8 years, I would have been a complete and utter write-off. And the last, perhaps 20 years of my life, if I lived that long, it would have been a mess. It really would.
One of the concepts which arose in the 60s and 70s and now has become part of the language of stress is post-traumatic stress disorder. You see that not just in soldiers returning from battlefields, but in everyday urban and rural life. People who have car crashes, people who are victims of crime. They have flashbacks, they avoid the area where the crime occurred. They have nightmares, they have intrusive memories.
I used to dream every night while I was doing child abuse work. Never had one night go by without a dream. And just about in every case there was some trauma. There was something going wrong, and mostly it related to the light on my television set. See it? That little red light there? Now that light, for me, has been the headlight on a train coming down the track, and I'm tied on the track. I'm going to be killed very, very shortly. It's been my house on the top of a hill on fire. Flames, they're flames. It's been a fireball coming out of the sky about to kill me and my family, and numerous things like that. That light just represented so much. And then I realised that for me to have seen the light on the telly, I didn't have my eyes closed. I couldn't have had them closed. And so I was spending half my nights lying in bed with my eyes open.
It becomes damaging when the stress is very severe. If it's repeated, if you can't do anything about the stress, if you don't have any control, if you can't fight and you can't fly, if you can't run away.
You start getting the stuff that's affecting you psychologically and emotionally, and you're thinking, but I can't give in, eh? Like, I've got to hang in there, I've got to get right through to the end. And I would often say, I'm going to retire in this job, I'm going to get right through to the end, because that's what everybody expected of me.
People may respond to stress in a psychological way, which isn't helpful, and can sometimes make the original problem worse. And occasions they find themselves up a blind alley and don't have any other way of solving the problem, or feel they haven't got any way of solving the problem. Those sort of people may well end up harming themselves.
It rips you to bits. I mean, most adult males, normal ones that are not paedophiles, are just totally disgusted by the thought of another male having sex with a child. And you feel like you want to get this guy and string him up, eh? And yet when you go to interview him, if you let those emotions come out at even in that time, you know, and say banged the table and told him what you really thought of him, well, you're not doing your job, and you'd never ever get an admission, you know. So there's been 8 years of controlling emotions at work, and then, of course, your subconscious just takes over those emotions. And that happened at